It was a warm Thursday afternoon when Judge Marcus Wilson stepped off Flight 1826 at Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport in Atlanta. After 5 days in Washington, D.C., speaking at the National Judicial Conference, he was glad to be home. The prestigious event had gone well, but Marcus missed his family and the comfort of his own bed. At 52 years old, Marcus had served on the federal bench for nearly a decade. His reputation for fairness and brilliant legal mind had earned him respect across the political spectrum. Before becoming a judge, he had worked as a prosecutor and then in private practice. His journey from a modest neighborhood in South Atlanta to federal judgeship was a source of pride for his community. Marcus pulled his phone from his pocket as he walked through the jet bridge. 3 messages from his wife, Diane, reminded him to pick up milk on the way home and that their daughter's piano recital had been moved to Saturday. He smiled, already feeling the pull of normal life after days of formal legal discussions. The airport buzzed with the usual activity. Business travelers hurried past families with small children. Gate announcements echoed through the terminal. Marcus adjusted his navy blue suit jacket and straightened his tie. Even after a long flight, he maintained the dignified appearance expected of a federal judge. "Judge Wilson," called a voice. Marcus turned to see Carlos Mendez, a lawyer who had argued several cases in his courtroom. They shook hands, exchanging brief pleasantries about the conference. "Your ruling on the Pearson case last month was spot on," Mendez said with admiration. "Clear, precise reasoning." Marcus thanked him modestly. This was typical, running into attorneys around the city who either praised his decisions or politely avoided mentioning rulings that had gone against their clients. As they parted ways, Marcus checked his watch. It was just past 3:30 p.m. If he could get his luggage quickly, he might beat the worst of Atlanta's infamous rush hour traffic. He thought about his evening plans. A quiet dinner with Diane, maybe catching up on the novel waiting on his nightstand. Walking toward baggage claim, Marcus noticed 2 uniformed airport police officers watching travelers. This wasn't unusual, but something about their focused attention made him take note. The officers scanned the crowd, occasionally whispering to each other. Marcus had worked with law enforcement for years and recognized the look of officers hunting for someone specific. When he reached baggage claim, Marcus stood patiently waiting for his luggage. He texted Diane that he had landed safely and would be home soon. Around him, wary travelers gathered their bags, some reuniting with waiting family members. The carousel started moving with a mechanical groan. Bags began appearing, tumbling down onto the belt. Marcus spotted his black suitcase with the small blue tag Diane had attached years ago, making it easier to identify among the sea of similar luggage. As he reached for his bag, Marcus felt a strange tension in the air. The same 2 officers he had noticed earlier were now standing nearby, their eyes clearly fixed on him. Something didn't feel right. Marcus had experienced this sensation before, the weight of unwarranted suspicion that followed him occasionally, despite his position. He pulled his suitcase from the carousel, set it upright, and extended the handle. Maybe he was imagining things. The officers might be watching someone else entirely. Marcus took a deep breath and began walking toward the exit, his mind already shifting to thoughts of home. What happened next would change everything. Marcus had walked only 10 steps toward the exit when a firm voice called out behind him. "Sir, stop right there." The command came from Officer James Brennan, a stocky man with a crew cut and 7 years on the airport police force. His partner, Officer Kevin Reynolds, a taller, younger man with close-set eyes, moved to block Marcus's path. "We need to speak with you," Brennan said, his hand resting casually on his holster. Marcus stopped, maintaining his calm exterior despite the sudden rush of adrenaline. He had learned long ago that in such situations, appearing anything but composed could escalate matters quickly. "Is there a problem, officers?" Marcus asked politely. Several travelers slowed their pace, watching the scene unfold. A mother pulled her curious child closer. "We've received information about a person matching your description involved in drug trafficking," Reynolds said, his eyes scanning Marcus from head to toe. "We need to check your bags." Marcus blinked in disbelief. "There must be some mistake. I'm Federal Judge Marcus Wilson. I'm returning from a judicial conference in Washington." He reached slowly for his wallet, careful to make his movements deliberate. "I have identification here." Brennan stepped closer. "Please put your hands where I can see them." "I'm just getting my ID." Marcus explained, his voice steady despite the growing knot in his stomach. Hands where I can see them, Brennan repeated, louder this time. People were definitely staring now. Marcus raised his hand slightly, his wallet still in his right hand. My judicial credentials are in my wallet, he said. Reynolds snatched the wallet from his hand. He flipped through it, pausing at Marcus's federal judicial ID card. A flicker of uncertainty crossed his face as he showed it to Brennan. This could be fake, Brennan said dismissively. We've seen good forgeries before. You can call my chambers, Marcus suggested. My clerk can verify my identity. Sir, turn around and place your hands behind your back, Brennan ordered, ignoring Marcus's suggestion. Is this really necessary? Marcus asked, maintaining his composure though his heart raced. I'm telling you, I'm a federal judge. This is a mistake. Now, Brennan barked, stepping forward menacingly. Aware of the growing crowd of onlookers, Marcus knew arguing further might make things worse. He slowly turned around, his mind racing through legal precedents and proper procedures. Procedures these officers were blatantly ignoring. The cold metal of handcuffs clicked around his wrists. The sensation was shocking. In 25 years of practicing law and serving on the bench, Marcus had never been on this side of the justice system. My bag contains case files and legal documents, Marcus said quietly. You have no probable cause for this detention. Reynolds unzipped Marcus's suitcase right there in the middle of baggage claim, roughly digging through his neatly packed clothes and legal papers. His conference materials spilled onto the floor, presentations, legal briefs, and a program listing Marcus as a featured speaker. Look at this, Reynolds muttered, holding up the conference program with Marcus's photo and biography clearly printed inside. Brennan glanced at it briefly. Could still be part of the cover. Smart criminals plan ahead. An older woman nearby gasped, That's disgraceful. Can't you see he's telling the truth? Ma'am, please stay back, Brennan warned. A young man had his phone out, recording the entire incident. Others were whispering, some looking outraged, others uncomfortable. Marcus stood quietly, humiliation washing over him. Travelers he had walked past moments ago, possibly even some who had recognized him with respect, now saw him handcuffed like a criminal. I want to speak to your supervising officer, Marcus finally said, his voice firm despite the indignity of his position. You'll get your chance to talk, Brennan replied coldly. After we finish our investigation, now move. With an officer gripping each arm, Judge Marcus Wilson, respected jurist, community leader, and family man, was marched through the busy terminal in handcuffs, his legal reputation seemingly counting for nothing in the face of the officer's determination. What they didn't realize was that their actions had just set in motion events that would eventually destroy their careers and change the department forever. The walk through Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport felt endless to Marcus. Every step in handcuffs stretched time in a cruel way. Travelers stopped and stared. Some pointed. Others quickly looked away, uncomfortable with the scene unfolding before them. Keep moving, Officer Brennan ordered, his grip tight on Marcus's arm as they pushed through the crowded terminal. Marcus held his head high despite the burning shame. He had sentenced criminals to prison, had ruled on cases worth millions of dollars, had earned the respect of the legal community across the nation. Yet here he was, being paraded through one of the busiest airports in the world like a common criminal. A young woman in business attire gasped as they passed. Oh my God, she said loudly. That's Judge Wilson. Officer Reynolds shot her a warning look. Mind your own business, ma'am. But her recognition started a chain reaction. A middle-aged black man in a suit pulled out his phone and began recording. This isn't right, he said loudly. I know who that is. He's a federal judge. Sir, put that phone away, Brennan barked, but he didn't stop walking. I have every right to record this, the man replied calmly. This is a public place. Marcus caught the man's eye and gave a slight nod of gratitude. The small act of solidarity meant everything in that moment. As they approached a side hallway leading to the airport security offices, Marcus spotted Lisa Chen, a flight attendant who had served on jury duty in his courtroom the previous year. Her eyes widened in recognition and shock. Judge Wilson? She called out. What's happening? Miss, step back, Reynolds warned. Lisa ignored him. This is a mistake. I know him. He's a federal judge. Ma'am, this is police business, Brennan said firmly. Lisa pulled out her phone. I'm calling the court right now. Marcus felt a small spark of hope. Someone who could verify his identity was taking action. They turned down a corridor away from the main terminal, away from the public eye. The officers' grips seemed to tighten once they were out of view. They pushed through a door marked Airport Security Personnel Only. Inside, a small, stark room awaited. A metal table with 3 chairs, a single window with blinds drawn, a camera in the corner of the ceiling. Sit down, Brennan ordered, roughly guiding Marcus to a chair. Are you going to remove these handcuffs? Marcus asked calmly. Not yet, Reynolds replied. We need to verify your story first. My story? Marcus raised an eyebrow. You mean my identity as a federal judge that you could confirm with a simple phone call? Brennan slammed his hand on the table. Listen, we got a tip about drug trafficking. Someone matching your description. Designer suit, expensive watch, traveling alone. The tipster was very specific. So you detained me based on wearing a suit and a watch? Marcus asked. Do you realize how that sounds? Reynolds smirked. We know how these operations work. Professional-looking people make the best mules. Marcus took a deep breath. Officers, I understand you have a job to do. But this detention is unlawful. You have no probable cause, and you've ignored my credentials. This is textbook racial profiling. Playing the race card already? Brennan scoffed. Typical. I'm not playing anything, Marcus replied evenly. I'm stating legal facts. Facts that will become very relevant very soon. Outside the room, voices grew louder. A woman's voice, firm, authoritative, demanded to know where Judge Wilson was being held. That sounds like my judicial assistant, Marcus said. It appears someone has contacted my chambers. The officers exchanged nervous glances. For the first time, doubt flickered across their faces. The door burst open. A tall, imposing woman in a security uniform entered. Her badge identified her as Captain Rivera, head of airport security. What the hell is going on here? She demanded, taking in the scene, a handcuffed black man in an expensive suit sitting across from 2 increasingly uncomfortable-looking officers. Drug trafficking suspect, Brennan began, but his voice lacked its previous confidence. This man, Captain Rivera, cut in, is Federal Judge Marcus Wilson. His office is calling. The Chief Judge of the district is calling. And unless you have actual evidence beyond he matches a description, you just created a nightmare for this entire department. Marcus met her eyes with quiet dignity. The public humiliation was over, but its effects were just beginning to ripple outward. What happened next would depend on what kind of man Marcus Wilson chose to be in this moment, and what kind of justice he would seek. Captain Rivera's presence changed everything in the small interrogation room. The air of authority that had surrounded officers Brennan and Reynolds just minutes ago seemed to evaporate under her stern gaze. Remove those handcuffs immediately, she ordered, her voice leaving no room for argument. Reynolds hesitated. Captain, we have protocols. Now, Rivera's command echoed off the bare walls. Brennan pulled out his key and reluctantly unlocked the handcuffs. Marcus rubbed his wrists, the red marks where the metal had dug into his skin already beginning to form. Judge Wilson, I cannot begin to express how deeply sorry I am for this incident, Captain Rivera said, her tone shifting from anger to sincere regret. This is not how our department operates. Marcus straightened his jacket, his dignity returning with each passing second. Thank you, Captain. I appreciate your intervention. Outside the room, the commotion continued to grow. Multiple voices could be heard arguing, and the unmistakable sound of news cameras clicking suggested word had spread beyond the airport walls. Your judicial assistant is outside, Rivera explained, along with the airport's legal counsel and, it appears, several reporters. Brennan's face paled. Reporters? Who called the media? In an airport full of smartphones, did you really think marching a well-known federal judge through the terminal in handcuffs wouldn't draw attention? Marcus asked calmly. A knock at the door interrupted them. Rivera opened it to reveal Sarah Jenkins, Marcus's judicial assistant for the past 8 years. Her normally composed face showed a mixture of relief and fury. Judge Wilson, are you all right? She asked, rushing to his side. "I'm fine, Sarah," he assured her, though the emotional impact of the ordeal was beginning to settle in his chest like a heavy weight. Sarah turned to face the officers, her protective instinct obvious. "Do you have any idea what you've done? The chief judge has already called the mayor and the police commissioner." Brennan and Reynolds exchanged worried glances. "We were just following up on a tip," Reynolds mumbled. The morning after the airport incident, Marcus sat in his home office surrounded by stacks of legal documents. He had barely slept. His wife Diane brought him a cup of coffee and rested her hand gently on his shoulder. "You don't have to go in today," she said softly. "No one would blame you for taking time." Marcus shook his head. "I have to, Diane. Staying home would send the wrong message." His phone hadn't stopped ringing since yesterday. Colleagues, community leaders, and reporters all wanted statements. The video of his detention had gone viral overnight, with millions of views and thousands of angry comments. At 8:30 a.m., Marcus's doorbell rang. Chief Judge Eleanor Hamilton, his mentor and the head of the federal court where he served, stood on his porch with a grim expression. "I came personally," she said as Marcus invited her in. "This isn't just about you, Marcus. It's about the integrity of our entire justice system." They sat in Marcus's living room, where Judge Hamilton laid out the options. "The FBI Civil Rights Division wants to open an investigation," she explained. "The Department of Justice is involved now, and the Airport Police Department's internal affairs team has already suspended both officers pending review." Marcus nodded, taking it all in. "What about the tip they claimed to receive?" "That's interesting." Judge Hamilton leaned forward. "They say it came through their anonymous tip line, but the timing is suspicious. The call came in just minutes before your plane landed." "Someone knew I was on that flight," Marcus said, the implications clear. "Exactly," Judge Hamilton agreed. "Which suggests this wasn't random." The doorbell rang again. This time it was Elijah Washington, a prominent civil rights attorney and Marcus's longtime friend. "I hope you don't mind me stopping by," Elijah said, "but this case needs proper handling." As they discussed strategy, Marcus's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Check your email. You weren't the first." Marcus opened his email to find a message from a former airport employee named Tanya Roberts. The subject line read, "Evidence of pattern, Officers Brennan and Reynolds." The email contained a folder of documented complaints against both officers spanning 5 years. All involved black travelers. All were dismissed due to lack of evidence or officer discretion. "This changes everything," Elijah said, scanning the documents. "This establishes a pattern of behavior." Judge Hamilton nodded gravely. "The question is, who buried these complaints? This goes beyond 2 officers." By noon, Marcus was sitting in a secure conference room at the FBI field office in downtown Atlanta. Special Agent Lisa Morales spread photographs across the table. "These are all individuals who filed complaints against Officers Brennan and Reynolds," she explained. "Business executives, doctors, an NBA player, and now a federal judge." "What happened to these complaints?" Marcus asked. "Buried," Agent Morales replied. "We found them all marked resolved with no disciplinary action. Someone higher up was protecting these officers." Marcus studied the faces in the photographs, all black professionals, all people who, like him, had worked hard to achieve success in their fields. "There's more," Agent Morales continued. "We've pulled the officers' text messages from their department phones." She slid a printout across the table. The messages between Brennan and Reynolds were filled with racial slurs and boasts about targeting well-dressed black travelers. "They called it fishing for big ones," Agent Morales explained, disgust evident in her voice. "They specifically targeted successful-looking minority travelers, hoping to find something to justify their prejudices." Marcus read through the messages, each word fueling a determination that was replacing his initial shock and humiliation. "Who authorized access to their text messages so quickly?" he asked. "The police commissioner herself," Agent Morales replied. "She's furious. This scandal is spreading beyond the airport police to the entire department. There's evidence that supervisors were aware of these practices." As Marcus left the FBI office, reporters called out questions from behind a security barrier. He stopped briefly. "Will you be filing a lawsuit, Judge Wilson?" one shouted. Marcus looked directly into the cameras. This isn't about money. It's about accountability and ensuring this never happens to anyone else. The investigation is just beginning. 3 days after the airport incident, Marcus sat in the green room of Atlanta's most-watched morning news program. The makeup artist had just finished touching up his face for the cameras. This would be his first, and likely only, television interview about what happened. "We're on in 5 minutes, Judge Wilson," the young producer said, poking her head in the door. Marcus nodded, checking his tie in the mirror. He had carefully considered whether to speak publicly at all. His lawyer had advised against it, warning that anything he said could affect potential legal proceedings. But Marcus had a different perspective. "The people need to hear from me directly," he had told Diane that morning, "not just as a judge, but as a citizen who experienced injustice firsthand." The studio lights were bright as Marcus took his seat across from Vanessa Carter, a respected journalist known for her tough but fair interviews. "Judge Wilson, thank you for being here," she began once they were live. "The video of your detention has been viewed over 20 million times across social media platforms. How are you doing?" "I'm processing it one day at a time," Marcus replied honestly. "But my focus isn't on my personal feelings. It's on what this incident represents for our justice system." "Can you take us through what happened?" Vanessa asked. Marcus described the events calmly, without embellishment. The facts were powerful enough without dramatization. "What we've learned since," he continued, "is deeply troubling. These officers had a history of similar incidents targeting black travelers, particularly those who appeared successful. And these previous complaints were ignored." Vanessa asked. "Not just ignored, actively buried," Marcus clarified. "That suggests this goes beyond two officers to a systemic problem within the department." The interview cut to security footage from the airport, showing Marcus being led through the terminal in handcuffs. The humiliation was clear on his face, though he maintained his dignity throughout the ordeal. "This footage is difficult to watch," Vanessa commented. "It's difficult to live through," Marcus replied. "But countless citizens experience similar treatment every day without cameras present, without the privilege of a title that eventually forces authorities to listen." As the interview continued, phones across the Atlanta Police Department began ringing nonstop. The commissioner called an emergency meeting. The mayor issued a statement promising a full investigation. The governor's office requested briefings. Meanwhile, in a small apartment across town, Tanya Roberts watched the interview with tears in her eyes. As a former airport security employee, she had reported Officers Brennan and Reynolds multiple times for their treatment of black travelers, only to be ignored and eventually pushed out of her job. "I told them," she whispered to her empty living room. "I told them this would happen someday." By evening, news vans lined the street outside the airport police headquarters. Inside, internal affairs investigators combed through years of records, uncovering a pattern of similar incidents, all involving the same officers, all swept under the rug by the same supervisors. Captain James Mercer, head of the Airport Police Internal Affairs Division, stared at his computer screen in disbelief. The evidence was overwhelming. "How did we miss this?" he asked his deputy. "We didn't miss it," she replied quietly. "We chose not to see it." As night fell, social media exploded with more videos, other travelers who had experienced similar treatment coming forward with their stories. Hashtags demanding justice trended nationwide. Marcus watched some of this unfold on his home television before turning it off. The constant coverage was exhausting, but necessary. His phone rang. It was the U.S. Attorney General herself. "Judge Wilson, I directed the Civil Rights Division to make this their top priority," she said without preamble. "What happened to you raises serious questions about equal protection under the law." "Thank you, Madam Attorney General," Marcus replied. "But this needs to be about more than one incident or one judge." "It will be," she promised. "The investigation is expanding as we speak." As Marcus hung up, he realized that what had begun as a personal humiliation was becoming something much larger, a potential turning point in how law enforcement was held accountable for racial bias. The question now was how far the investigation would reach, and who else might be implicated in the system that had protected these officers for so long. 6 months after the airport incident, the federal courthouse in downtown Atlanta buzzed with activity. News vans lined the street outside. Protesters held signs demanding justice. Police officers maintained a careful perimeter around the building. Inside courtroom 305, Marcus sat not on the bench but in the gallery. This was not his courtroom. Today, he was here as a witness, as a victim. "All rise," the bailiff called out. "The United States District Court for the Northern District of Georgia is now in session, the Honorable Judge Victoria Chen presiding." Judge Chen, a respected jurist known for her no-nonsense approach, took her seat and surveyed the packed courtroom. "Be seated," she instructed. "United States versus Brennan, Reynolds, and Sullivan. Are the parties ready to proceed?" Marcus watched as the three defendants sat with their lawyers at the defense table. Officer James Brennan and Officer Kevin Reynolds were in dark suits instead of uniforms, looking much smaller than they had that day at the airport. Captain Richard Sullivan, their supervisor who had buried previous complaints, stared straight ahead, avoiding eye contact with anyone. "The prosecution is ready, Your Honor," announced Assistant U.S. Attorney Maya Johnson. The trial had begun 3 days earlier with jury selection. Now it was time for opening statements. Maya Johnson stood, straightening her jacket as she approached the jury. "This case is about abuse of power," she began. "It's about officers who targeted citizens based on the color of their skin and supervisors who protected them instead of the public." She outlined the charges: civil rights violations, conspiracy, falsifying police reports, and witness intimidation. The evidence included text messages, airport security footage, and testimony from multiple victims, including Judge Marcus Wilson. The defense attorneys argued their clients were following protocols based on legitimate tips. They painted a picture of officers doing their jobs in a dangerous world. Officers Brennan and Reynolds were protecting the public. Defense attorney Robert Clark insisted. They acted on information provided to them through official channels. By mid-afternoon, it was time for Marcus to testify. He walked to the witness stand, was sworn in, and took his seat. From this new angle, he could see the jury clearly, 8 women and 4 men of diverse backgrounds, all watching him intently. Maya Johnson approached. "Judge Wilson, could you please tell the court what happened on April 12th when you arrived at Hartsfield-Jackson Airport?" Marcus recounted the events clearly and precisely. He described the humiliation of being handcuffed in public, the dismissal of his credentials, and the treatment he received from the officers. "In your opinion, Judge Wilson, why were you detained that day?" Maya asked. "Objection," called defense attorney Clark. "Calls for speculation." "Your Honor," Maya countered, "as a federal judge with expertise in civil rights law, Judge Wilson's professional assessment is relevant." Judge Chen considered briefly. "I'll allow it. The witness may answer." Marcus took a deep breath. "Based on the evidence that has emerged since that day, including the officers' text messages and pattern of similar incidents, I believe I was detained because I am a black man who appeared successful. Their own messages indicate they specifically targeted well-dressed black travelers, calling it fishing for big ones." During cross-examination, the defense tried to suggest Marcus had been uncooperative or that the officers had legitimate suspicion. "Isn't it true that you became confrontational when officers simply asked to check your ID?" Clark asked. "No, that is not true," Marcus replied calmly. "I immediately identified myself as a federal judge and offered my credentials, which they dismissed." The most damaging testimony came later that day when Tanya Roberts, the former airport security employee, detailed how she had repeatedly reported both officers for similar behavior, only to have Captain Sullivan threaten her job if she continued making trouble. As the day ended, the evidence against the officers mounted. Text messages showing racial slurs, falsified reports about previous incidents, and testimony from 15 other victims who had experienced similar treatment. In the courthouse hallway, a reporter asked Marcus how he felt about the proceedings. "The system is being tested," he replied. "Whether justice will prevail remains to be seen." 1 year after the airport incident, Marcus stood at the podium in the main conference room of the Atlanta Federal Courthouse. Camera flashes lit up the room as reporters recorded his every word. Behind him stood a diverse group of community leaders, law enforcement officials, and citizens who had been victims of similar profiling. "Today marks not an ending, but a beginning," Marcus said, his voice steady and clear. The Justice Through Accountability initiative officially launches today with $3 million in funding to help those without means fight civil rights violations. The journey to this moment had been long and difficult. The trial of Officers Brennan and Reynolds and their supervisor, Captain Sullivan, had lasted 3 weeks. The evidence against them proved overwhelming. Text messages, security footage, falsified reports, and testimony from 17 victims painted a clear picture of systematic racial targeting. The defendants targeted successful black travelers because they resented their success, the prosecutor had argued in closing statements. They abused their authority to humiliate citizens based solely on race. The jury had taken just 7 hours to return guilty verdicts on all charges. 3 months later, Judge Chen delivered her sentences: 7 years for Officer Brennan, 6 years for Officer Reynolds, and 9 years for Captain Sullivan, whose position of authority made his actions even more egregious. This court sends a message today that a badge is not a shield against accountability. Judge Chen had declared at the sentencing. The investigation hadn't stopped with these 3 men. It expanded to reveal a culture of bias throughout the airport police department. 4 more officers and 2 additional supervisors were fired. The entire department underwent mandatory retraining. Now, as Marcus spoke to the assembled crowd, he focused not on punishment but on progress. "What happened to me was just one incident in a pattern that affected countless citizens," he continued. "Many without the resources or platform to fight back. This initiative will provide legal representation to those who experience similar civil rights violations." Marcus had used his own settlement money from the lawsuit against the airport authority, $3.8 million, to establish the foundation. He had returned to the bench 6 months earlier, bringing with him a deeper understanding of the justice system's failings. In the front row sat Diane, beaming with pride, alongside their daughter Maya. Next to them was Tanya Roberts, whose courage in coming forward with evidence had been crucial to the case. The mayor and police commissioner were there too, showing their support for the reforms that had been implemented. "The true measure of justice is not how we treat the powerful," Marcus said, "but how we protect the rights of every citizen, regardless of race, status, or resources." After the press conference, Marcus met privately with a group of black law students who had come to hear him speak. "How did you handle the anger?" one young woman asked. "I would have been furious." Marcus considered the question carefully. "Anger was certainly there," he admitted, "but I realized I had a choice: to let this incident define me through bitterness, or to use it as a catalyst for meaningful change. I chose the latter." "Did it shake your faith in the system?" asked another student. "It shook my complacency," Marcus replied. "I had always known these issues existed, but experiencing them personally removed any distance I might have maintained as a judge. It reminded me why our work matters so deeply." As evening fell, Marcus drove home with Diane, reflecting on the journey of the past year. "Do you think anything has really changed?" Diane asked softly. Marcus watched the city lights pass by before answering. "Systems don't change overnight," he said, "but accountability creates ripples. Those officers behind bars send a message. The department reforms set new standards. The initiative will help others fight back, and most importantly, people are watching now." He reached for her hand. "Change happens one case, one department, one city at a time." Today in Atlanta, justice took a step forward. As they pulled into their driveway, Marcus's phone buzzed with a text from a fellow judge. "Saw you on the news. What you're doing matters. This is how we build a better system, one brave step at a time." Marcus smiled. The humiliation of that day at the airport would never fully fade, but its transformation into meaningful change had given it purpose. Sometimes justice required more than a gavel. It required courage to stand up when the system itself failed.